Okay, so the key thing that you're going to notice using this specific technique, right, of going from Revit to Twinmotion via the FBX format is materials are going to work directly off of your model and the materials that you have assigned to the model. Okay, so if I open up the modeling panel here, or the materials panel here, and I start going with, so this on Cliff House, this is wood siding, right? So let's just go ahead and find a generic wood. And what I would recommend, a lot of this is wood that's set up for flooring, but it'll work reasonably well for wall surfaces too, at least on the first pass. And the maple and ash are both really good ones to start with. The maple is nice because it has a little bit more wood grain in it. But the lighter colors are nice to work with because I can always nudge the color inside of Twinmotion once I assign it. Okay, so I'm just going to drag and drop maple onto the walls as a good starting point. Okay, so let's start there as we start working through our materials, and you're going to notice a couple of things. First of all, the wood is really, really small. Let's go ahead and open up Cliff House. I want to get some images open on this as well so we can start using some of those as references. See if we can get a little bit closer of an image so we kind of know what that wood is doing. Perfect. So it is a very much an aged, weathered wood. And it is running horizontal. The planks are fairly large, probably in the 4 to 6 inch range. We could count up on these right here to kind of get a perfect idea of exactly how big they are. But we'll just go with this for right now, okay? And again, your goal in this case is not replication, right? That's not what I'm asking for. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, can you use these tools on your own projects, right? So the first thing that I know we need to do on this is change the scale of the texture. And what you'll notice almost always using the FBX format, okay, when I go Revit, export FBX, and import that FBX into Twin, the scale of things in terms of texture application, they're going to be small. Almost always you're going to have to raise the scale of the texture maps, okay? So I'm just going to send that up to about 4 probably, something like that, which looks much more reasonable. And we will get into creating some custom texture maps as well, for sure, but just not yet. We want to get some things rolling first, okay? Next, the wood is much grayer, right? It's a bit more weathered. So to do that, if I have my material selected, and this is important to note, okay? If I am deselecting everything, right? So I'm going to select something different in terms of my materials, okay? Right here, I have a little eyedropper that is always active. And if I want to modify a material, the best way to do that is to use that eyedropper and select the material that you want to modify. That way we're making sure we're modifying the correct material that's applied to the correct object, okay? So all of your texture maps are going to have this little color button. And again, the 3 little dots means more options. Again, universal program thing, 3 little dots, more options. And what I can do is I can just push that a little bit more gray. So I'm going to set that a little bit closer to the middle. and make it a little bit darker. And boom, we immediately have something that looks less mapley, more weathered wood. Okay, it's not right for sure, but it's closer to what the intent of the design is. Okay, and mainly just showing you that so you kind of begin to get a feel for how you can find and modify materials quickly. Okay, when we get into more customization, we'll get there in terms of building custom texture maps. But a lot of times, just early on, you want to find something, throw some materials at it, and go from there. Okay, so there's a lot that you can do with the existing materials. Next, let's get some of the mullions with the correct texture. So let's look at what's in there. And it looks like they are either black or dark bronze. Let's go to the interior and see what we can find. Oh, so they're wood on the interior. Oh, nice. They're white on the interior. And again, it looks like they are black on the exterior. Yeah, that's probably the best one. Right? So let's go ahead and grab the appropriate texture map for that, or the appropriate material, I should say, for that. So they are going to be metals. Again, I'm probably just going to use a brushed aluminum. They're not chrome. They're not super highly reflective. Matte chrome could even work pretty well for something like this. You don't want to go like carbon because it's not carbon, right? So let's try and select something that's reasonably close. A lot of the metals have sort of a bump map or reflection map on them, which is going to change how they appear. So I'm just going to use the brushed aluminum and then go to my color and drop that color way down to begin building something that looks about right. Okay, next, let's go to the structure. So the structure is similar, right, to the mullions, but it's definitely brighter, and it definitely has a bit of modeling to it, right? It's not a super consistent color. And this should be where we start running into some problems. So this should start to have some fun here. Oh, and also, our flooring. This base right here has that same exterior material wraps all the way down through this. And we're going to see a problem with this as well, which we might choose to address now or we might choose to address later. So again, I'm going to go back to my eyedropper, select that maple one, and then drag and drop this onto my exterior so that texture map continues all the way down. Cool. Okay, so let's get into putting a texture on the structure here. So if I take that same brushed aluminum, I should be able to go back to that. And if you notice, that is going to be different. So we're reapplying the same material as a base, but it is not going to show up with that modification to the darkness on the color because I'm going back to the source again, right? I'm going back to the base material. So I'm going to drag and drop that onto my structural elements. Josh, is this where it did the entire ground plane for you? Yeah. Some of you, did that do your entire ground plane? Yeah. I'm not sure why it didn't for me. Okay. I thought I had mine set up that way too, so we can talk about what goes wrong. There we go. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, so that's going to happen for me in just a second too. So let's talk about putting a material on this stuff right here as well. So I'm going to take that same brushed aluminum and put it onto that. And you'll notice it does everything, right? And the reason why is those generic models inside of Revit all have the same material, right? They are set to default. Okay, so we need to go back into Revit and modify that, which is super easy to do. Okay, so I'm going to switch from Twinmotion into Revit. And I'm going to navigate to my default 3D view. And I'm guessing not all of you have this base in place, but I'm going to start with that one because it's the easiest one to see. Okay, so I'm going to select that base model, and I'm going to change its material. I'm going to just call it surface or ground or something like that, okay? So to do that, if you notice, I don't have a material option over here to my left, right? And I'm not going to have it until I edit the family. So if it's a generic model and if I need to change the material, I need to select and then click Edit Family or Edit in Place. Once I do that, I can select my model again, and if I scroll down, you will see Material and by Category. And where you see by category, that essentially means your material is set to default. And so that's what I need to change. Okay, so I've got my object selected, scrolling down on its properties, material, I'm clicking here in the by category field, and then the 3 dots, the ellipses. Okay, from here, in terms of how I'm going to use this in Revit, I'm just going to go the Create New Material button right down here. So I'm going to go Create New Material. I'm right-clicking where it says Default New Material. I'm going to right-click and rename this to Ground Plane. Now, if I'm working extensively in Revit, I might choose at least schematically to push some colors and things around just so I can see how things are separated. So when it moves into Twinmotion, I have a little bit better idea. Oh, I've got these things separated. So let's do that really quick as well. So with ground plane selected, I'm going to go to appearance. So there are two things that are going to drive how things look inside of Revit. Your appearance and graphics. Appearance is a little bit more based on when I do renderings or when I have my display set to photoreal. But I can kind of tie these two things together. Graphics is going to be more for hidden line or shaded views, right? But it's pretty easy to tie those two things together. And so that's the way that I like to show setting this up. So I'm just going to go to my default color, and I'm going to select that. And since this is grass, our initial thought is, well, let's make it green like grass. But what I can tell you is that always looks terrible. And it looks even worse when you print it out. Right? So grass in reality is more like this color because it is a combination of the ground underneath and the blades of grass popping up. And also green just jumps off the page and off the screen like crazy. So you really have to mute it. Right? So I'm just going to make it this sort of gray-green tone. And say OK. And then when I go to graphics, I'm going to click Use Render Appearance, very top mode of that graphics tab. And here again, if I'm doing hidden line work, I can go ahead and set some surface patterns and cut patterns and things like that. But for right now, I'm not worried about that. This is all about getting things to Twinmotion. So I'm going to say OK, and now you can see I've got sort of this greenish ground plane. All right, so the next thing was the structure, and then my stack, and this little extension, all were the same material as well. So let me go finish. I'm going to select the stack, edit in place. I'm going to select it again, material by category, and I'm just going to go ahead and say create new material, rename it, and call it stack. The appearance is a darker gray. And then let's look at the actual project and see what that is. That looks like it's all metal clad. That looks like it has the wood trim on the end of it, or the wood siding on the end of it, maybe, as well. So even though it's a little bit complicated, let's make it happen. That'll be kind of cool. All right. So for this guy, I'm going to go ahead and say finish model. That was for the stack. I'm going to select this piece right here. And I'm going to go edit in place. This will be a new thing to show in Revit. Okay, so for this, again, I'm going to go material by category. Create new material. Rename. And I'm just going to call this metal trim. Okay, because if I look at Cliff House, all of these edges have either a flashing or a trim or a cap. They all have something on them, right? And we're not there yet in terms of the model, but I want to get there. But this material that sort of wraps this piece is that same material here as well, right? It's a metal flashing of some kind. So I'm just going to call that metal trim and say appearance. Again, it is a darker something. Use render appearance and OK. So that has the base of that piece, but this front surface right here is a different. It looks like a different material in the image. It looks like they have that front trimmed with wood siding. Okay, so to do something like that, I can come into, got to remember where it's at. Yeah, okay. So there is a button called Paint. And Paint allows you in Revit to say this surface of this object is different from the surfaces around it. Okay, so we need to create another new material that's called wood siding. So I'm going to go create, modify, where is it? Manage, thank you. Manage and materials. So we were accessing the materials panel through that where it says default materials, or by surface, or whatever that button was. The other way to get to the materials in Revit is to go to Manage Materials. What's that? Yeah, we were going through the properties. This is the direct access to the materials panel is just to go to Manage Materials. So I'm going to do the exact same thing here. I'm going to go to Create New Material, rename, and let's call this Wood Siding. The appearance, I'm going to set the color to sort of a lighter gray with just a pinch of yellowness in it. And say OK. I'm going to match my render appearance and say OK. And technically, we should probably set all of those walls to that same material as well, but it's already working, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Can we just set that paint to be the default wall?
Yes, we can. Yeah, we can totally make it that default, but it's going to change everything in Twinmotion if I do that too. We'll probably do it here in just a minute. Okay, so zooming in on this, right, I can go to Modify Paint Surface. Okay, so that's what this little button is. So there's Paint and Remove Paint. So in other words, if you screw up, there is an undo for it. But we're just going to go Paint, and this gives us sort of this abbreviated version of the Materials panel. And so I'm going to go up to that material that we just created, which was wood siding. Right here. Oh, very last one. Wood siding. And I can hover over just that end. And it's going to paint just that surface. Okay, so when I send this to Twinmotion, it's not going to paint that entire object one color. It's going to keep that front surface isolated and separated. Now, let's get into some of the technical aspects. If I'm really going to model this correctly in Revit, I'm actually making a model for that siding there on the front face. But also, to be serious, in school, you never have that kind of time. right? I mean, you just don't. Professionally speaking, when you model this, you need to model that correctly. So when you cut a section, somebody at some point in time did a detail on how this, I don't even know exactly what to call this thing. It's not a scupper, but it's like a drainage gutter thingy, right? Somebody did an entire architectural page on how that's to be built, and it needed to be modeled correctly and detailed correctly, okay? Rarely do you guys have that kind of time in school. Rarely. So just applying that paint to the surface is at least going to show what your design intent is. So let's click Done, Finish Model, and we're back to that. Okay, so if we look at those exterior walls, we were just talking about this. Those exterior walls, right now, if I wanted to change the material on them, if I go to Edit Type, you can find the material for the walls underneath the structure. Because again, we are in building information modeling, okay? Your material just isn't how something looks inside of Revit. It's going to be its R value, how insulative it is. It is going to be its structural capacity. What else is going to be in there? Its cost per square foot. All of those things can be embedded into your materials. Again, academically speaking, we are typically only interested in how it's going to draft as 2D line work or how it's going to create an image in terms of our rendering, right? But all of that stuff is in there, and it's buried into the structures panel, how the wall is actually constructed. Okay, so I'm going to go to, again, it is just sort of a default material. It says by category. If I select that, the 3 ellipses, and let's go ahead and set that wall to wood siding and say OK and OK. And you'll see it's going to update that color. So using that basic shading view is a really good method to sort of diagrammatically see how all my materials are going to work. Everybody cool? All right. So I need to, at this point, assuming that I'm not using the direct link between Revit and Twinmotion. And again, that link exists and you can install it. And speaking of installing things, many of you are going to start getting notes over the next few days. Revit 2023 is out. Okay, if you haven't seen that yet. I actually don't think it's out just yet. It's going to be here in the next couple of days. I think AutoCAD 2023 just released. My response to that is never during the middle of a semester, y'all. Just lots of nope. First of all, it's always a good idea to give software a month or two for the front-end users to figure out what's working and what's not working, because there's always going to be some initial bugs in a new release of software, but never during the middle of a project. And when you get to an office, you'll find that it's a really tricky thing for when do you roll over to the next version of a software. Because everybody kind of has to know and have something circled on the calendar. Okay, this is when we're switching over. So have your projects ready and kind of know and yada, yada, yada. But academically speaking, we have really good breaks. Summer break and we've got winter break. Those are the times you're wanting to roll over to new software. Never during the middle of a semester. You're just asking for extra problems, okay? So even though it says, hey, upgrade, update, don't. Lots of no. Cool? So let's go File, Export, FBX. Typically, I would be saying at this point in time, create a new version. If I'm working in Revit, I'm always creating new versions and putting the date after said new versions, okay? If I'm working as an individual, right? That way I'm creating my own backup system. With Revit to Twinmotion, using this method, we're always overwriting our files. So that way I can simply import, actually not re-import, but update my file, okay? So I'm just selecting Cliff House, FBX, save. It should give me a warning message. Do I want to replace it? The answer to that is yes. And again, make sure you're in a 3D view as you're doing this, for sure. So now I can go back to Twinmotion. And I'm going to go back to my very top box of sort of my workspace down here at the bottom ribbon. And I can hover over Cliff House, and there is a little, I don't know what to call that symbol. But what it means is reimport or update. So clicking on that, it's going to reprocess everything and essentially update. And if you notice, I lost some materials because the walls, in particular, the walls are now set to siding. They weren't set to siding previously. But I didn't lose very much. So, and again, Twin, this whole thing is designed to work fast. So for me, I'm just going back to that wood, putting it back on that surface, back to my brushed aluminum, that surface, brushed aluminum, that surface. If you notice, it picked up that siding right there. I need to make those darker. I need that also to be darker. And that structure stuff to be darker. Boom. Super fast. Super simple. If you notice, this is going to create some problems for me, I think, because I believe all that is running the wrong direction. So it's probably a really good idea for me to think about breaking this and this into two different objects so I can create a floor material. Let's see if I can get to some of the interior shots here again. Nope. Yeah, definitely different material quality here, right? And if I look at this interior, these interior walls, definitely a different material on those interior walls as opposed to right now, that siding, that same siding on the outside is also on my inside, right? I'm not worried about that right now because we're really only working on the exterior. But I know I'm going to have to update that. I know I'm going to have to update the floor, make the floor and the deck two unique things, and then eventually I'm going to have to put a different material, and it's going to be that same paint material, right, for the interior walls as the exterior. But at this point in time, really, all of you are sort of free to start working on updating this scene and getting it ready to go. On Friday, we will start talking about setting up views and setting up renderings. Cool, but right now I want you all to have some work time on it. I'm going to keep the recording going for just a second because I'm going to go ahead and do two more things on the ground plane. I want to start getting some grass and stuff. And once I get to that point, this is all stuff that we've already covered in class. Once I get to that point, I'm going to show you one more key element in terms of bringing in objects from Quicksilver. Okay, so about 5 minutes of work time, and then we'll look at Quicksilver, which is a ridiculous entourage for Twinmotion. Okay, so I'm going to go to the ground plane. Natural ground plane. Again, super green grass never works particularly well, so I'm going to use grassy ground and zoom in and update its scale to something about like that, which if you'll notice looks completely terrible without more grass on it. This is what I used to render out all the time as a professional, something that looked exactly like that. It's really sad to think that through. But let's go ahead and start doing some additional entourage next. So I'm going to go to vegetation paint. Oh, now it's before vegetation paint, y'all. Before vegetation paint. Always save. File save. Because if Twin is going to crash on you, one of the highest probabilities of crashing is when you're doing the vegetation paint thing. Okay? It is really demanding on your laptop when you do this stuff. So I'm going to go with grasses. tall grass and tall grass are probably the two that I want to use. And I'm not going to paint everywhere. I'm just going to sort of go around the project. So going into paint mode, we'll start big. I don't think it was this grassy, is it? It's kind of fun.
How did you grass?
What's that?
Every time I do grass, it doesn't show up
I'll have to take a look at your settings and see. Well, yeah, I mean, I can put grass anywhere, right? I can do that. Doesn't mean that I should. So you have to be really smart about where you're painting on. And if you watch the little bubble that is your paint icon, it's going to show you what surface is receiving that geometry. Okay, so you just have to kind of zoom in. You have to continually work the diameter of your paintbrush to know how it's going to play out. Okay. All right. So we're at this point now where I want to break up the grass just a little bit because it's definitely more rocks and stuff like that, right? And this is way steeper than what I modeled in Revit too. But I don't care. I'm good with it, with where this is going, okay? So inside of Revit, we've already looked at these entourage elements that exist. So breaking up the ground plane with some great big rocks and stuff is definitely to my advantage, right? And I can kind of come in and do that and place them. But there's also a limited number of things that I can do, right? What's that? Oh, wow. That's huge. That's kind of fun. So, right, so maybe I want something like that in there as well. Too much? Maybe too much. I don't know. And you certainly have to pay attention to what's happening because that doesn't look right. Right? So, knowing that, oh, and you also kind of look for these spots as well. Like, oh, I should totally have a rock that lives right around here. And then I'm going to spin it so that it looks like a different rock. Right? But I have a limited number of things. Okay? So, with your license of Twinmotion comes the absolute most ridiculous library of entourage in the world. Okay? So, if I go back into Chrome, you will find this company that Unreal purchased about 4 years ago, called Quicksilver. You can find it just by going Quixel or just Google Quixel, Quixel. So Quixel, there's two ways that you can work with Quixel, and so I'm going to show you the easiest way I think to work with it in Twinmotion. So Quixel does two things specifically that we will use a bunch. They do 3D models, really high-end 3D models, really high-resolution 3D models. And textures for surfaces, right? So if I go to products and megascans, you will start seeing a lot of these surfaces and objects, and also sort of where they were used, because again, this is high-end professional level stuff for sure. Okay, I can go to products and then browse megascans is what you're going to often use. Okay, so underneath types, just to show you, starting with surfaces, you have all of these different surface types that we can save and then bring in to Twinmotion as something that expands that default material set. And these are pretty tremendous things to be using. They are super, super cool. However, the thing that you need to be aware of is your computers have limited computing power, even if you have a super high-end laptop, okay? So just because you can use these doesn't mean that you always should. Last semester, as I was showing this, I wasn't strong enough in my warning. I think I had 3 students that within the next 30 minutes of showing this, their file size in Twinmotion went from a handful of megabytes to 5 gigs. Okay, this can explode your scene really fast. So these objects and things that you're finding, these materials that you're using, are your hero things, right? I've got this surface. I want it to be really high end. I want it to look amazing. So I'm going to go and grab something from Quicksilver, right? It doesn't mean that you should just use Quicksilify everything. It will get out of control. Now, the more practice you get, the more you can kind of manage those, or maybe in Photoshop, you de-res things just a little bit, or, bringing in this 3D asset versus that 3D asset, a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to work with. You'll get better at it, and you'll find yourself using this catalog more and more. So there are surfaces, and there are 3D assets. So 3D assets, these are all things that have been scanned and then rematerialized. Okay, so they work together. Everything from full buildings, and I know that those exist, so don't even try it, architecture students. Right, but everything, or portions of full buildings, to, in this particular case, oh, that's actually brand new. So nice, massive tundra terrain. I find myself just like cruising through Quicksilver sometimes, and just like 2 hours later, I found all kinds of stuff and shouldn't have. But something like this matches that site really well. This would give me something that I could really start modeling around. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways that I can work with this. The first one is I can create a Quicksilver account. You have to do so through your Unreal account, or it won't work, right? But what I'm going to show you guys is I use the website to browse because it's easier to see. I can see sort of full screen what's happening. Once I have something like massive tundra rock formation that I'm really excited about and want to use, I can go back into Twin, and on my library, right, on this library panel, if I open that up, there's a button called Quicksilver Megascans. So if I activate Quicksilver Megascans, I can go to 3D Assets, and then I can go to, hopefully that's underneath Nature, and I'm guessing under Embankment, Mossy, Tundra Rocky Ground. That's not exactly what I was looking for. So let's go back one. Maybe I even do a quick search string here, although I think that's going to search through everything on the library, and I don't want that. Let's look under rocks. Ooh. Embankment. It's not going to be under snow, which those things are so super cool also. But again, this is why I like to browse in the library first. Let's do a quick search. What did somebody find? Massive.
Rock.
It's under massive tundra rock formation. Let me do a search here really quick just to see what happens. Massive tundra rock formation. Let's just see if it will show up. It did. Okay, yay. So the search is digging through that. Now, again, when you're doing those searches, you have to make sure, like Quicksilver, you have to be connected to the internet for that to work, okay? Because this is essentially, we're opening up a web browser over here on the left-hand side. Now, obviously, it's not downloading this entire Quicksilver library. There's like hundreds of gigabytes worth of stuff here. So when you find something that you like, you're going to select it. And is it a drag and drop? There, thank you. It's hidden. It's hidden underneath the rock. That's what I was looking for. That little download button, I've got to download it into my files first. So I'm going to select download. And again, this shouldn't be big. Now, the reason why I say to do it here, right, inside of Twinmotion, these things are already going to be set up at a reasonable resolution, right? If I'm on the website, if I'm on Quicksilver, if I go to this guy, I need to sign in really quick. Sign in to download. Oh dear. Oh dear. Yeah, I'm. It's been 3 months. My passwords have updated since then. I'm not sure what my password is. What you're going to see is, and I'll show you guys this later. I think there are 6 or 7 levels of detail that you'll be downloading from Quicksilver. One of them being it's really like just a handful of polygons. So if it's a mile away, it renders very, very quickly. And then as you get closer to it, you have the option of then replacing that asset with a higher resolution version, right? That's how the Unreal Engine works. Twinmotion doesn't work that way for us, right? So what we're getting in Twinmotion when we download it right here in the top right is a really good compromise, middle of the road. It's not the highest of the high resolution, and it's not the crappy, it's a mile off, so I just want to know that it's there kind of version, right? So we're getting a really good default middle. Once that is downloaded, I can now drag and drop it. It's going to place it. And blammo. We have that. Spin it around. Drop it down to the ground a little bit. Slide it underneath. And now we have something that's really starting to break up that ground plane in a more natural, more organic way. Cool? Quicksilver Mega. I like Megal scans. It sounds more Transformers. Quicksilver Mega scans. Use them carefully. Don't model your entire project with them. It will get out of control really fast. But use them for those hero objects. And familiarize yourself with that Quicksilver library by visiting their website and perusing through it, because it makes a dramatic difference when you bring in the right assets. Like really, just from that, going from a grassy plain down to that, breaks it up, makes it feel more natural. That's starting to show up like a hero rendering already. Cool? That's it for the day, you guys. A little bit of work time, a little bit of time for Q&A at the end of class, and we'll